Welcome back to a new episode of the Win More, Live Better podcast as we kind of have these conversations with different coaches, different thought leaders, different experts around kind of the human side of leadership and coaching. And today's guest has been somebody that's been on my radar for quite a while. And I'm just super appreciative of her taking some time to have the conversation today. And more than anything, I'm just really eager to welcome you all, or to welcome Erin Matson to the conversation. So, Erin, I just want to first off by expressing again gratitude for you taking some time and being willing to have the conversation today.
Of course. No, I'm excited. I think win more, live better, that goes hand in hand with a lot of things that I live by and that we do around here. So I think, yeah, it'll be a great conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in. I mean, I think when you have a conversation with someone like yourself that has the resume that you do, the pedigree, that all the different accomplishments, there's actually a lot of angles we could start
Mhm.
with, which is a fun challenge as a host and as a guide for the conversation. Where I actually thought would be kind of a fun place to start is like, could you take me back to that moment you walked into the locker room as the head coach for
Mm.
the first time? And just, here you had been teammates with many of those women in the program. And just walk me kind of through like what was going through your mind, what you were feeling, and just what that moment was like for you.
Yeah. So I guess I'll get to the actual moment, but what I didn't realize is that there were so many moments beforehand that were leading to that moment. And I guess kind of going through the process of applying. And before even any of the interviews, it was really important to me that I sat down with the girls and my teammates, at the time and expressed, like, hey, I'm going after this job. Not, I, I definitely didn't know at the time that I was going to get it. I definitely didn't know what any outcome was going to be. I wasn't asking for their support. I wasn't trying to tell them, I'm big on that. I wasn't trying to tell them how to feel, what to think. It wasn't like that. It more was just out of respect through the grapevine. I'm going after this. And I was lucky I had their support throughout it and throughout all of the interviews. And then that started. And towards the end, they genuinely had no idea when the announcement, when our sport administrator said team meeting, we're announcing the head coach, they had no idea. So of course I was a little nervous. I mean, it was overwhelmingly just the feeling of excitement. But I also, and I'm sure we'll get into it, I like to prepare. I'm, big on preparation and just making sure then when that moment comes, whether it's out on the field, leading a staff meeting, leading the first time you're welcoming the team as the head coach, um, then it's just flow state because you've done all of the preparation. So, I had my bullet points. I walked in and, gave my 2 cents, not getting too deep into it because again, they were aware that I was applying and I did have their support in, being the hire. And then, it was a serious, good first introduction meeting. I could tell, the positive emotions going on through the room when they saw me walk through the door. Um, and I just felt a tremendous amount of pride. And then to close out the meeting, I knew exactly who was going to say it. I knew it was going to be a question. She's one of my best friends, um, former teammate. I roomed with her, lived with her, and then I coached her. Um, and she was on the first team that I was the head coach for. And she raised her hand and she goes, "So, do we call you Aaron or Coach?" And the whole room just started laughing. And it was the perfect close to, all right, this is a new era and this is how it's going to be. And those boundaries, all these things, we're going to have to figure them out. But it also kind of just alleviated any, I don't know, unique feelings in the moment. So, and then we got right to work. So it was a very important moment, in my just life and the history of this program. But then just like in any fashion we do things, okay, what's next? There's a job to be done.
Yeah, it's a time of probably so many emotions, some of which you just described, because you're closing kind of one chapter and you're
Mhm.
now starting the next one. And you mentioned having a few kind of key things that you really wanted to express in that kind of first meeting. I think over the last few months, and I think now with social media and different programs now, you're actually starting to get more and more behind the scenes look at these different coaches across different sports, the messages that they're sharing to their teams, especially when they start. What was it really important for you to convey, whether it's the specifics of it or just the vision that you wanted to craft in that kind of first message to that group?
Yeah. I think I had 3 points that I'll share with you that I touched on, and that kind of, kickstarted the journey for us. But I also want to call out to the fact that I came into a program, obviously that I was a part of as a player on one side of things, but I came into a very storied program. I came into the most successful program in college field hockey, with an amazing team, a beautiful facility, all of the resources for a university that cares about Olympic sports and women's sports. So, I had the foundation there, and a big part of my job was not needing to cause an uproar and change everything. Like what we were doing was working. We were four-time national champions in the last 5 years when I was hired. It was not like we needed to change everything, change what we stood for, um, change how we do things. My job was and is to modernize, to innovate. How are we staying one step ahead? How are we, okay, taking this amazing foundation and raising the level and not getting complacent? So, in terms of what I was asking of them and telling them, it wasn't anything new for our identity or how we did things. But what I did harp on, there was the first point was communication. Huge on communication. You can never over communicate. And the only way we're ever going to be able to do things is if we communicate with each other. It's a very collaborative environment. It's a very, I create an environment where they are learning, the players are learning from us just as much as we are learning from them. And our film sessions, everyone's talking, and our staff office, we're in there planning practice and talking about things and throwing it up on the whiteboard. It's not siloed or whatsoever. And in a unique situation with your former teammate going to be your head coach, communication is even more key. And again, I touched on it. I'm not here to tell you what to feel, how to think, anything like that, but we need to be on the same page. So let's have that open line of communication. And then with that, the second point, was transparency. And I lean on transparency a lot. I had to tremendously my first year and even through my first 3 years, just because I believe anybody, I think I believe in the power of anybody understanding the purpose behind things. And then that buy-in is much greater, especially female athletes and young female athletes. And then especially in a role where I came in and I had to prove myself, with, what I was thinking. And I had the trust, I had the support, like we talked about a little bit, but sometimes just explaining the purpose behind a decision or a reason for doing something, they're like, okay, now let's go attack it together. There's a full buy-in, full understanding why. And then sometimes the transparency factor of it, the purpose is just, I'm the head coach and this is why I'm asking for it. And I don't need to explain myself, but at least they hear that and they're like, all right, she's transparent about that. I'm not going to ask. Sometimes all it takes is that extra layer. And that it's helped me. I've really seen the power in that. But I ask that from them too, to just trust and have that buy-in and understand, that I would also be honest and transparent with them. And then the third piece, was respect, which you can imagine the, house, that I lived in with my players when we were teammates, the Franklin Street, our main street out on campus, what we were doing on Saturday nights together. And then all of a sudden I'm their head coach. I got a work phone right away because I was like, I can't have my players scrolling up and seeing certain texts and photos that you do when your teammates and sisters and part of a family, and now all of a sudden my coach is coming in and, so just all of these little, really tiny pieces of everyday doings, but that are new boundaries. And the respect that I asked of them was purely, okay, you know what that relationship is to like on the bare minimum definition of head coach and player relationships, but then also in our own way, it was our job to figure out what that line of respect was with our situation and what those boundaries looked like and what they looked like in the first couple weeks compared to the first season compared to the third year compared to now, and um I think it was important for me to us to have that open line of communication, the level of transparency and vulnerability in it, but then also the willingness from us as a staff, from me, but also from the team to have that level of respect and also not be afraid to figure out that level of respect too with the situation at hand. Um, and then, yeah, once we concluded that kind of talk on everything and just like the welcome, thank you, I'm excited part of it, then that's where the question of do we call you Erin Coach come in. And that went back right to, my answer was whatever you feel comfortable with. And for most of them, it's Erin, because that's how they know me. And I'm not going to get hung up on that or causing weird emotions if, I'm making one of my best friends call me coach. Like that's just weird, unless they want to and it feels right. And now some of them do. Now my like recruiting classes who were recruited by me, rather than the former coach, now there's a shift in that, is exciting in itself. But again, we'll just stay flexible and adaptable. But that was kind of the gist of the opening meeting.
That's awesome. It's cool to hear how clear those things were, and just not only how important they were for the program, but also for you. And it's clearly you can pick up on some of the things that are most important to you in the midst of all that. And you make this transition from being, arguably the best player in the country in your given sport to suddenly being responsible kind of for developing this, the next generation. And again, many of which that you've now competed with and trained with and so forth. I'm curious, like, what was some of the harder parts of that identity shift for you
Yeah.
in that transition from player to coach?
Definitely. I think well, I guess the most obvious one is learning all of the ins and outs of what happens behind the scene. And we were kind of chatting about it before once we got on the call and just joined right away. But my circle of knowledge of what it took to be a head coach was a little bit bigger than the average student athlete just because of our success as a program, the rooms I was in, the conversations I was having. NIL was passed, which also, at the time broadened um, just exposure to opportunities and conversations. But I had no idea the just amount of time you spend not coaching. And actually, I love that part of the job. I love the fact that it's like a business. I know some coaches, and there's not a right or wrong, some coaches want to be out on the field. And I'm out on the field those 2 hours. That's my safe haven. I don't need to think. It's the best time of day. But I love the fundraising and the travel planning and the budgeting and the event planning and the alumni network and everything that goes on behind the scenes. Um, I just had no idea it took so much time and energy. I was like, yeah, I'm a head coach and that's our job title, which means I'll coach the most. And that's just not reality. So there was definitely an adjustment there, but one that I really enjoy and love. Um, and I think just all of the learnings with that, I never had to travel plan like that. I never had to handle a budget like this. So there was just learning there, and there still is learning. I think we're in a profession of learning. So that's exciting too. I think another learning curve or hump, whatever you want to call it, was definitely having those hard conversations with the players surrounding playing time, surrounding, if they're not getting done what I need them to get done, if we need to discipline them, if we're, handling scholarships with sitting across from one of your really good friends and former teammates and having that conversation, it's uncomfortable, and I think we leaned a lot on the transparency and honesty piece of that there because it was like, all right, let's start a meeting. Are you ready to get a little uncomfortable? We're going to talk about finances. And then they laugh and giggle. And then it's like, all right, let's just get into it, Or, okay, this might be uncomfortable because I'm going to have to lay into you because you're not getting done and not doing the work or whatever. And they're like, okay, here we go, and it takes just that weirdness out of it. But it doesn't mean they're any less hard, So those were definitely, I guess, just interesting identity shifts where I wasn't having those conversations in the living room on the couch with them at home. Um, and then I think finally, it's for any athlete playing their sport at an elite level for a really long time and having that passion in it, all of a sudden not being out there is a shift in just how you carry yourself, how you think through things, how like it's just my schedule completely changed, and I'm no longer in when the whistle blows in the game being able to make an impact, but I'm, motivating and providing energy on the bench and um feedback and everything, but I don't have the ball in my stick. So there was definitely just a shift there too. And I guess just, yeah, a learning curve in how to coach and how to do it, where it's not just watch me, this is how you do it, but asking the right questions and guiding the conversations and getting them to arrive at the solutions um, and applying it and everything. So, all things that I really enjoyed about this journey so far, but definitely, you know, growth areas and shifts in kind of how I operated for so long.
I want to go back for a brief minute when you talk about like those challenging conversations, because I think that's been a theme that has emerged in a lot of my conversations, even on this show with different coaches and a lot of the work that I've done outside of this space. And I liked how you kind of described that it doesn't necessarily always get easier per
Mhm.
se or like make them easier, but like what I almost hear you describe is like the skill, like you get more skilled at them, you get more comfortable in how you set those up. For you, how have you seen that skill kind of grow for you over these last few years? And in particular, have there been either perspective shifts, a mindset or skills that you feel like have helped you with being more intentional, I guess, in those, not to be more intentional, but be more skilled in those
Yeah,
conversations?
it's a great question. I Yeah, I would say there's definitely been um I guess I guess I'll start with actually first. What I didn't realize came or comes really naturally to me actually happens before any hard conversation. Um, and I think we all know the importance of it, but it's like always at the front of my mind. But you creating that foundation of a relationship or connection with your players, your staff members, they need to understand you as a person. They want to see you as a person. And also, in return, you need to understand them. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of focus, especially when you have a large staff or a large team and you need to I actually an analogy I was told once by another coach, it's like you have all of these spinning plates, right? And you need to keep making sure they're spinning by just pulsing them, just checking in on them. And if you forget to spin one, if you forget to ask a kid how their family's doing or how school is, or hey, how was your weekend, simple, or share just some kind of level of connection with them, that plate falls and crashes. And while you're busy cleaning up those pieces, another plate falls, and now you've got double the work, and now all the plates are falling, right? So like you can't take time off from investing in your people, and just little touch points throughout the day to build that foundation of a relationship with them. So then when you have these conversations, I mean, if you need to have a great conversation, great, that's easy. Like we can all do that. But then if a hard conversation comes in, they know it's from a place of love. They know it's just about you caring about them or driving a standard and understanding that you're looking out for a group and a team and whatever, and on top of them as an individual. So yeah, point blank, they know you care. And then comes the skill and delivery, but we can't have that skill and delivery and all of the reflection and how we handle those conversations if there isn't that relationship that's solid there. Um, because then it's just fake and then it's mind games and questions and you don't get the most out of them. They don't respect you. So it's something that's opened my eyes where I just liked getting to know my teammates. I just enjoy chatting with my staff and talking about what Netflix shows we're watching and what restaurants we're going to eat, but it's all of those tiny moments that add up. So then when it's time to get uncomfortable, you can do that together. Um, and then getting into the skill piece of it, like I said, I mean, the transparency and honesty to me is huge. I'd rather them either know the purpose or understand where I'm coming from, how deep, depending on how deep that explanation needs to be. But I'd rather them know that and go home and be mad at me for 12 hours and wake up the next day and know where they stand and understand that they know I'm looking out for the standards of the program, the person next to them, also them, and all of these things, and be frustrated. I don't care. Go home in the living room and call your mom and be upset at me, but then come back and just know where you stand. Then them question, where I stand, what I mean, what the reasoning behind something was for them. I just, that's something I'm willing to sit with. And I think they respect that too. So I lean on just being honest. And then I think always closing it out as a leader with something in terms of, how can I help you with this? What do you need from me? Or this is what I'm going to do to help you, but always tying it back to we're in this together. I'm not telling you these things and throwing you out to the wolves and just expecting you, like, that's not coaching. That's not my job. That's not mentoring at all. But, you know, okay, I need this from you. This is why I need it from you. Very clear, very honest. And here's how we're going to do it together. And this is how it's going to impact you, everyone else around here. This is how it's going to help me and you do, raise this bar together, whatever it is. But okay, are you ready to do this? Like, are you ready to buy in, or do you understand how this will help? Let's go attack it. So I think, there's a cycle there, but, and you're never going to get it all right, and then that's where the reflection comes in and the learning. But, um, yeah, I think transparency and honesty is huge. I think, again, the collaboration side of it, that this is a partnership. We're in this together. That matters, but can't do any of that unless you have that solid foundation.
I love that you used that word partnership. That was the word that was kind of coming up, particularly like you said, once that conversation's had, as we continue to go through this together, like we're doing it together. I think that's really key. Another piece that stands out is when you talk about that transparency, and it even goes back to that first message that you gave to that group. One of the things that I share often in this space is the notion that I think oftentimes leadership has breakdowns in three kind of core areas. A failure to define expectations and standards, a failure to manage expectations and standards, or a failure to model the expectations and standards. And what you're in essence describing though too is like when you have that transparency on the front end, you've defined those things clearly for individuals. It makes it a lot easier,
Yeah, clearer.
easier per se to have that quote unquote hard conversation, because there has been that expectation and transparency
Right.
on the front end, which I think is super valuable. Um, I've heard you describe in previous interviews, just there were a lot of seeds planted for you to transition into the head coaching role, like not just at UNC, but in general, and an appreciation that you had for leadership. So when I first was thinking about this, I was going to be like, okay, I'm interested after that first year for you. What were some of the leadership lessons that you learned that maybe you didn't as a player, but we're a few years removed? Like, you were hired in January of 2023. I'm actually interested to kind of like zoom out for a moment and like tell me a little bit about Erin's journey and development and where you're at today in the
Mm.
spring of 2026 versus Erin when she was hired
Oh my
in
God.
2023, which I know is a loaded question, but
Yeah, but like a good one, because this is honestly, I'm in a state right now of a lot of this reflection and I'll explain why. And it's funny because sometimes, like, I set expectations, right? And that, bites you in the butt, because you shouldn't set expectations. You should just flow and you should just do whatever. But this is kind of, I don't know if I would call it an expectation, but I guess just the planner, preparer side of me coming into the job. I knew year one was going to look extremely different than year four. And I'm very particular with those numbers because for whatever reason, I just thought the 3-year trajectory was going to be the hump to get over. And that was going to be a huge, like, just time period of a lot of change, a lot of development, me for the program, for the team, all of it. And not that year four, which we're in now and on, will be any lighter or easier or not as much growth or whatever that is. But for whatever reason, that 3-year period really stuck out to me when I was first hired. And looking back now, year one was drinking out of a fire hose. I did not sleep. I did not close my laptop, and I loved it. I loved every single piece of it, but I was either here coaching, I was at home doing work because I was learning about stuff and running to meetings. And again, back to the point of learning how to budget properly, learning just, I mean, I played here, I went to school here, and I stayed here. So it's not like I needed to walk around and learn the campus or where things were located, but I needed to know if I used this credit card versus this credit card. And if I sent it to the business office, who do I email? And like all of these little things, on top of showing up every day and doing my job here in the office. I managed, when NIL was passed, I managed a clinic staff and a camp staff, whatever, but they were my friends and we had an organized booklet and it was on a smaller scale. Like I never had to manage, people, my coaches or my staff members coached me. They learned from one of the best coaches to ever do it. And then here I come, so there was just so much learning going on. And we executed and we did it. And it was one of the most transformative years of my life. But then year two came and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't come up for air. And year two's message was, okay, I proved that I can do it. I proved that I can manage a staff and make them feel empowered. We just did a lot to organize, to modernize, to just make things more efficient and communicate better. So I was like, okay, business minded speaking and I guess just, kind of my vision and everything and my 1-year plan to 5-year plan, like, okay, I believe in myself, actually. Not that I didn't, but I was like, okay, we did it. We were successful. Year two was more, we'll take a couple steps in a couple areas, but let's just repeat. And I think it's funny how that panned out because my whole career, everybody always asked me, like my playing career, what'd you do? What'd you practice? What'd you like? You were so good. Why were you so good? And I was like, I just did the same basic things over and over and over again until I felt like I was good enough at them. And then if I ever thought I was good enough, I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to do them better. And so it was looking back now, I'm like, year two, okay, repeat, just do this again. Like prove to yourself that you can do this again and have this consistency. And we did, and we weren't as successful as the national championship my first year coaching, but we made it to the semifinals and it was a hell of a season and my staff grew even more. I grew even more. And then year three last year was where I really felt like I was in creator mode, where I was just implementing a lot more things with how, I don't know, just again, that evolution really skyrocketed with fan engagement, with our alumni network, with visions and projects I had with our stadium and our facilities, still organizing some of just like our principles of how we play and how we're structuring preseason. Like I felt like I was creating and that for me was a big shift from just, okay, let's survive and do it really well and win, but just survive, to all of a sudden now I feel in a place where this program fully resembles me. And, I just feel like I'm in a creator mindset all the time now. And in year four, I think this year already, and towards the end of last year, but I've definitely seen a shift in me in my management, my leadership, how, I'm developing my staff, how I'm developing our players as field hockey players, but to me, that's part of it. I want them to develop into strong and competent young women. And we're doing more stuff with career development, and that goes hand in hand with how they feel empowered and how they carry themselves in the classroom, and then we're doing certain things with our leadership group, and how are we talking about leadership? How are we thinking about this? And that correlates to how we're practicing, and our practices, obviously, how those are structured correlate to how we're performing. So I feel, yeah, like I'm managing and delegating better and developing people um, in this stage now. But looking back on those, 1 through 3 years, 1 through 3, um, it's just interesting to see how every single year taught me something different, and was in its own little phase. And now, yeah, this year for me is definitely, I think, skewing towards the like, I guess, business mindset, how I'm, just running the program and the company basically, to be better, which is really fun and exciting for me, if you can't tell.
On a personal level, I empathize a lot with some of what you described because it took me back a little bit to, when I was basically handed the keys to build the department with the Diamondbacks. I was by industry standards younger as well, not as young as you were, but you're handed the keys for this role that only 30 people in the world have, and you're trying to figure out like, yeah, what you described, drinking from the fire hose and being, as I was going through it, I thought I was, my head was above water. I don't know that it always was the way I thought it was. But it was, to your point, each year in essence had its own theme, its own season, and how it just evolved over the course of time. So I appreciated that sentiment. And I think the other thing is hearing you talk about your development as a player, as an athlete. It's a little bit more, I think, in some ways straightforward,
Yeah.
how to hone your skills
Yes.
physically, technically, tactically, and so on. As a leader, sometimes those things are a little bit more ambiguous for many. And so I'd actually be interested just, now what does your like development process look like? Like how are you intentional about trying to grow yourself in whatever facet? And just could you kind of give us a little bit of a snapshot of how you're trying to actively grow alongside your staff and players?
Yeah. So, well, and I liked your points that you talked about, and the way I like to think about it is, when I was a player, by like you said, it was straightforward. I use the word linear. Like if I do this, this is where I'll get freshman year to sophomore year to junior year, do this, whatever. It's not a straight line, of course, but like you said, now and I think that's why I'm so obsessed with it, with leadership and management and everything. It's like this impacts this, and then you go back to here, and then you're skewed all over, and it's like it's all I don't know, just affecting each other, but it's more like this mass rather than just this straight line of um, growth. And I think that's really fun and exciting because there's not that your development as a player, is there's a formula for it, because there's not, but there's definitely no formula for any of this, which is really fun, and hence the creative piece of it. Um, and to your question, I think it's funny to sit here and think about that, because all of these conversations that I've had with myself and my inner circle so far this year is exactly that. Like, because I feel like I'm in a place now where I can focus more on me, if that makes sense, and not in a selfish way. Um, but I'm a big believer in developing yourself. And I mean, it's even our staff, they, 1 to 2 times a year, they get to pick on something to invest in that betters them as a person. It can be totally like the way it's related to hockey or coaching can be such like, give me an argument, but like I don't care really what that argument is, because I'm huge on, if you invest in yourself as a person, if you invest in yourself professionally, like those go hand in hand. And I think, again, as a first through third year head coach, I didn't have time to worry about me or like what am I doing to develop? Like I everything was surrounded. How does my staff feel? How does the team feel? How do our captains feel? How do our donors feel and our parents group? Like I couldn't think about what I really cared to develop in. Um and now I'm in a place where okay, my staff gets to, do some fun stuff and focus on their personal and professional development. I can too. And I don't know exactly what that looks like this year, which is also exciting for me. But I know I'm in a place where I can start exploring how I challenge myself rather than being challenged because I'm asking the question of how to challenge someone else. They challenge me all the time. I've grown tremendously as a person and as a as the lead of this program, but not because I've been intentional with it. I think it's been a byproduct of trying to challenge everybody else. So I don't really have an answer for you, Zach. And if you have any tips, let me know. But maybe I mean, I need to I don't know how it's March already, but there's definitely it's time for a plan to be in place on like, yeah, how am I really being intentional for myself? And the byproduct will be everybody else still improving around me, but now there's a two-way street rather than it just being one, I think. So
No,
TBD.
well, I appreciate the honesty, and I think there's, as you describe, it's evident in hearing you talk about your journey, and you can pick up on how like reflective you are of your own experience too, which is obviously going to be a form of self growth and development or play a role in that. But it ties into, I mean, this is a really big reason why I made the shift that I did because, I got to a point where one of my pet peeves over the course of time, and this isn't just within an organization, this is across the board where, we would ask players, hey, go in the off season and we need you to come back with XYZ
Right.
improved, whatever those are. And then they'd come back 3 or 4 months later. And then the question is like, well, how have we gotten better
Right.
as staff?
Mhm.
Right. And how to like, what is our plan to get better and grow? And I think it's cool to hear you talk about just in general how reflective you are and how you're leaning into some different spaces. I think the other thing that I use this analogy or this quote a lot that it's hard to read the label from inside the jar.
Mhm.
And so the thought being like when you're in the pressure cooker, which, whether you're an athlete or like, how you kind of described year one, that was how my year one kind of felt like I was in the jar. Like
Right.
it's uncertain, it's ambiguous, it's all those different things. It's hard to sometimes see things with some perspective, and so having people in your life who, it's why I've become such a big proponent of coaches, having coaches, or at least working for exactly what you're describing, because there was like an English Institute of Sport study that found that 70% of behavior is
Mhm.
driven by the environment.
Interesting. I love that.
Interest, Interestingly, and it's like nobody shapes the environment more
No.
than coaches.
Mhm. I
So it's
love
like, okay,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of it's become a big word. It's like, hey, coach development will drive player development.
Right.
So I appreciated the honesty of like, hey, it's something that you have continued to grow, and it's something that you're leaning into, not just for
Mhm.
yourself, but also for your staff. And
Yeah.
I think that's also a really cool. I heard just the snippet yesterday of Kurt Signetti, the Indiana head football coach, and one of his players said he actually coaches the coaches more than he does us sometimes. And so anyway,
I love that.
um,
I appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, I coach development drives player development. That's a great line. And like you said, I think a big piece of what I did, the for example, we everyone knew what Carolina field hockey meant. Everybody knew the standards, right? But we didn't have the values and standards written out explicitly on a sheet of paper. Now they're on our stairs, they're on our walls, they're in their girls' binders. Like they know, they look at a word and maybe it's something small, but I believe it makes a big impact. Same thing with, the I kind of talked about it, how we break down our skills, our principles, where we go in the totem pole so that It's not just, okay, you have the ball, you should pass it here in this instance, pass it. That's not development. That's not coaching. It's, what is this environment of learning that we're creating? What is the clear structure that we're creating? Because we're humans. Like we don't know everything. We make decisions out of emotion, or we think this is our limit and it's not. But if there's an environment there that's kind of not controlling in a negative way, but guiding those decisions and that growth and development, yeah, like that's an environment anybody wants to be a part of, but you need to create that. So I appreciate you sharing that, Zach, because it's always just a good reminder to know that I'm not crazy, or that some of these feelings, are, and that's, I guess, also not to go off on a tangent, but we're a field hockey program, right? And the one of the biggest things that scares me, and that I think a lot of, in any profession, is for you to think like that, and for you to stay tunnel visioned and, okay, well, I'm a field hockey program. What would I do as a head field hockey coach? No. What is basketball doing? What is baseball doing? What is women's lacrosse doing? What is the CEO of Nike doing? What, all of these different, all of the greats are great for certain reasons, but you break it down and there's a lot of commonalities: business, sports, your relationships, how you handle yourself as a mother, a father, a girlfriend, a sister, whatever it is. So, I'm just obsessed with great people like you. And I think, again, what do those environments look like? What structures do they have in place? And what can we take and tailor here in our field hockey program? But yeah, like how does all of that overlap? I just think it's fascinating.
I very much share that that passion for just I call it like studying human excellence.
Mhm.
Just anybody that's great or elite at their craft, whatever that craft is. I have a deep respect for and appreciation for. I'll share one last quick aside, and then I want to come back to that for a moment with a question. Um, I'll share this just because it's I share a lot of these, and I'm like, these are reminders to myself as much
Yeah.
as they are for anyone. But when you were talking about that first year and drinking from the fire hose, and I think we've all probably gotten familiar with when you get on a flight and you have kids on the plane, right? The flight
Mhm.
attendant comes up and says, "Hey, make sure you put your oxygen mask on before." And I think we've all heard that, and yet somebody told me like, but we still don't do it. We
Mhm.
just, as coaches, we pour everything into everybody else.
Right.
And the add-on to it that I have really resonated with was, inevitably there will come a moment where you should probably put your oxygen mask on first, and you won't. So the question becomes, who in your life will put your oxygen mask on for you?
Mm.
And have you given them permission to do so? And I just was like, that's such a great distinction. And like, at least on a personal level, it very much resonates.
Yeah. No, I really like that analogy, and actually I respect the second half of it even more.
Yeah.
Have you made them aware? Um, One of the things that changed my life as a player, because I mean, and not to talk about myself, but I was at a different level, right, than my teammates. And with that, sometimes either came frustrations towards certain decisions or levels of whatever, however drill's going, or frustrations towards myself. Or you're just having a bad day, whatever. And I genuinely don't remember who told me, but I was asked once, "Do you have your person?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" Yeah, I have like all my friends, like I'm a team. What do you mean? And they were like, "No, no, no. Like, do you have your person where you're frustrated, or you're the captain today and you don't feel like talking, or something's going on at home and it's distracting you or whatever? Like, you're just not 100%. Do you have your person that you can go and just tell them and say, 'Hey, it's not my day. I need you to talk for me more today.' Or, 'It's not my day. If you see me getting frustrated, just look me, like, get my eyes and tell me, like, take a deep breath. Like, do you have your person?'" I was like, "Yeah, I have my person. I know who I would go to." And they were like, "Just one, not five, not a whole group, like just one, so that it's clear for you when you realize that you need to just voice something out loud or whatever. Just one. And I said, yeah. And then they said, do they know that they're your person? And it's the same kind of message of they need to know too, because that makes you being able to lean on them even more powerful. It gives them that, oh my gosh, like this person believes in me and trusts me, you know. There's so many layers to it, but I was like, no, they don't know that they're my person. And they said, you should probably tell them. So same kind of thing of, yeah, like who's going to put your mask on? And, it's definitely worth investing in relationships. Yeah, for people who would do that. But then I like your point about like, do they know that you would expect them to do that or need them to do that? Because I think that's a layer that sometimes people don't necessarily feel the weight of.
Yeah, no, that's really well put. I love it. It's you're right. It's a perfect parallel to that example. I want to be mindful of your time. I just have a couple last questions here. You described, and I've heard you talk before about some of the important conversations that you've had when you stepped into the role with some of those other coaches, people in other spaces and other sports and so forth. And I'm sure those conversations have certainly continued as you step into year four. What have been some of the more impactful either lessons, tactics, so forth, that you've taken, leadership principles that you've taken from some of these people outside of the hockey space,
Mhm.
that you've now made your own in your world?
Sure. There's a lot to think about, honestly, which I'm lucky here at Carolina. I mean, our coaches family, I have a ton of people to lean on who are not just, you know, seasoned veterans who have been doing it for a long time, but have been doing it very successfully. But then just, yeah, through over time and through experiences, I've um, just gotten to talk with some high level either coaches or athletes or whoever outside of our UNC bubble. The first one that always comes to mind when I'm asked this question is this is actually a fun story. I won't take too much time, but before I was hired, so I went to Bubba Cunningham, our athletic director, before my fifth year season because I had a fifth year because of COVID. And I said, just, I don't want to be overlooked. I'm not asking for the job, but just please don't hire anybody in season. Like, give me a chance. He said, okay, go win a national championship and we'll talk. And I was busy doing that, but I was like, I can't wait around. I need to prepare for this. I need to plan. So um, I reached out to Coach Mac Brown, who was the head football coach here at the time, and just wanted to pick his brain about everything. He sat down with me for 2.5 hours. We could have sat longer, but funny enough, Bubba walks in the room, didn't know I was meeting with him, and was like, "What are you doing here?" And I was like, "Nothing." And now we laugh about it today. But Mac and I sat there for 2.5 hours. I still have the notes from our talk on my phone. I still look back at them. But one of the biggest things that I took from him, it's a very simple line, but it's your people need to know that you'll fight for them. And he gave some examples in this and that. And I really didn't understand the power of that until I was in this role in coaching. Um, but they need to know that you'll fight for them, your players, your staff, but even the fan in the top row, nosebleed seat, whatever, they need to feel like she's got me. She's leading me. Like she values that I'm here, you know. So wherever anybody is on that range, our support staff, the people behind the scenes, the people we're talking about in the business office who I send my receipts to, you know, like they need to feel that I see them, I value them. Um and you know, whatever their scale of impacting this program is, it doesn't matter because they're impacting this program. So I carry that line with me every single day. I think another one I was told early on in my first year, because you can imagine there was some kind of like identity, um I don't know, I guess just like it was something to figure out because here I am being 23 years old, expected to act like sometimes a 23-year-old and sometimes wanting to just go act like a 23-year-old, but not being able to do so, or shouldn't be doing that, or not wanting to do that because I'm a head coach of a program. And all of these head coaches I'm sitting around the table with are 40 years old, married with kids. And so there was, back to the reflection piece of it. Should I be posting this on Instagram? But my players like that I go out to this restaurant and I just post that I like the food. But then what does this donor look like? But then also, what does he look at that like? But then also, I have a 10-year-old girl following me on Instagram and her mom, who's also friends with this recruit. How are they, all these different people taking all of these different messages in a different way? And how am I supposed to act to please everybody, So someone reminded me once, Erin, you were hired as a 23-year-old head coach. Be a 23-year-old head coach. I don't need you acting like a 50-year-old head coach. If I wanted that, I could have hired a 50-year-old, but I wanted you to connect with the younger generation, the student body, the donors who you naturally, talk to. I like that you have that range. If I wanted you not posting on social media or not doing whatever, I would have told you to delete Instagram, or I would have gotten a 50-year-old head coach, it was just a very simple reminder of, I hired you for you, basically. Be you and don't try to be anybody else. And I think it's funny when I hear that, it goes back to the coaches always pouring into everybody else. And that's the message we tell our players, right? Like, I don't need 11 of the same of you in the starting lineup. That's not a team sport. That's not gonna, we'll have the same holes. We'll all, like, you're not complimenting each other. Just be you and be the best you. But like, I recruited you to be you. But here I am, like, trying to please everybody, right? So it was a simple message of, you were put in this position. I believed in you for your qualities. Don't, like, embrace them, keep growing, keep whatever, but don't try to be anything else. And then I guess the last one, I'm trying to decide which one to go with. Those are pretty strong ones. I guess the last one, I would say, it kind of goes hand in hand with, like, the spinning plate analogy and just building the connection. I'll never forget. I was on the way home. We landed at the airport. It was Sunday. It was super late at night. We play Friday, Sundays. It was an away weekend. I'm on the highway. I'm like 5 minutes from home, and I check my work phone because I put it away. Like, I put it down. I was like, I just landed. Weekend's done. Like, I'm going to bed. Work phone away. And I don't know why I checked it. And I checked it when I was pulling off the highway and waiting at the red light, and I see a voicemail from Roy Williams. And I was like, oh gosh, why is Coach Williams calling me? How did he even get my number? Like, I was so confused. And I immediately, like, that's where your mind goes to, like, oh gosh, what's wrong? Like, why is someone reaching out to me? Whatever. I open the voicemail, and it's just a very simple 30 seconds in his southern voice. And he makes a couple jokes at the beginning. He goes like, your number. I know I'm just an old fart, but I figured out a way, all this stuff. And he goes, Erin, I just want to tell you that I'm proud of you, and nothing to it, but I enjoy watching your team, and, I wish you the best. You're doing amazing things. Just keep on keeping on. And that was it. And I was like, that's all it takes. That's all it takes is a simple 30-second voicemail. At what school, too, is the field hockey coach getting a call on a Sunday night from Coach Williams? Not even a basketball coach, but someone like Roy Williams. But it was so simple, and I just, not that he even meant that to be a lesson, but I took it as a lesson of, all it takes sometimes is a text to a girl after practice. You did really well today. I'm proud of you. Or pulling her aside or whatever. Or, if you go to a store that, one of your staff members or another coach or someone you care about, I don't know, in your inner circle or not, hey, this made me think of you today, and those pulses, again, back to the kindness and just, that building that relationship, those add up and those matter. And a lot of those moments, people probably don't even realize, like Coach Williams probably never realized that I would carry that with me, but I think those are the ones that last and stay with people. So just, if you think of someone like, oh, I should text, or, oh, I should, write this letter or let them know, just, you should do it, because it does matter. But I'll pick those three today that I kind of take with me.
Yeah, I know as you mentioned, there's probably many more, but I think those are three great lessons, three great stories, and I appreciate you sharing those. The last one, I'm gonna try to snip this in and very last question. So this is a question I do ask every guest at the very end, and I think it's actually kind of fitting that you shared the Roy Williams one because it does have some it is related to it in a sense. I'd love to know, Erin, like what are you proud of that you don't always get an excuse to talk about?
Oh, I hate that question, Zach.
Most
Absolutely.
do, most do.
Oh, I would say, oh God, that's like, okay. Um, I would say I'm realizing it more about myself now, but um, I'm very observant. And I think because I like to talk and like I'm very loud, like even my players laugh there whenever I'm like standing next to them, not on a field hockey field, they're like, you're really short. But I think just because you're so loud that you seem taller. And I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, I don't know. People don't expect me to observe as much as I do, I guess. Which is actually one of my favorite things to do. And I'm a very vocal leader. I'm a very like energetic, let's like set the tone for practice, whatever. But again, I don't, yeah, I think people realize how much I observe. And I don't just observe, but I try to be very intentional with doing that. So, um, in a way to help someone or someone needs something. I see a girl's, needs, I don't know, an extra tape on her stick or something, and she's playing with it and fidgeting it. Okay, observe, go grab the tape, just put it out of her locker. She has no idea how it got there, but oh, I've been meaning to ask about this. Why didn't I just ask about it? Or um just yeah, little things like that. I won't get too much into the details, but um I love event planning and our alums coming back and being really thoughtful with what gifts they like or how the setup for our senior day looks, and the color of the flowers and whatever, and all of the little details that maybe I'm the only one noticing, but I truly believe it makes a difference. And it's that um I think I just have a lot of fun with those quiet observations and choices because people don't always expect that from my energy. So, um, yeah, but it makes me proud to like impact in a kind of undercover way like that.
And imagine that you having the athletic career that you had, one of the qualities that may or may not have showed up in essence is probably a lot of versatility. You being able to, and I think like hearing you describe that, it's like there's also versatility as a leader. And
Mhm.
so I think to hear you share that, but also I think to peel back the curtain a bit on the seasons as a head coach, but also the seasons of your own growth and just kind of how that's continued to evolve. I'm just super appreciative of you sharing some insight into what goes on, not only internally, but also what you communicate to those around you. So more than anything, Erin, I just want to thank you for taking some time to have the conversation and peel back some of the layers for us.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I love talking about this stuff just like you. So it was a great way to start our Wednesday. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but no, yeah, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness and the questions and everything. And like you said, we're all here to just win more and then live better doing it. So, um, no, I really enjoyed this, Zach.